The steak had already gone cold by the time I checked my phone again. 8:47 p.m. 3 unread messages sat under Claire's name. You still coming? Dinner's getting cold. Claire? The tiny candle in the middle of the table burned lower with every minute. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the empty seat across from me. Again, outside our apartment window, rain tapped softly against the glass. The city lights blurred behind the water like someone smudged paint across the sky. I rubbed my tired eyes and looked down at my hands. Dust still sat under my fingernails from work. My shoulders ached from carrying concrete bags all day. But none of that mattered tonight. Tonight was supposed to be important. Inside the drawer beside me sat a small black ring box wrapped inside an old hoodie so Claire would never accidentally find it. 6 years together. 6 years of cheap apartments, late-night noodles, broken cars, unpaid bills, and promises about the future. I used to think struggling together made love stronger. Lately, I wasn't so sure anymore. My phone buzzed. Finally, I grabbed it too quickly. Claire, I forgot about dinner. Company event tonight. That was it. No apology. No heart emoji. Nothing soft. Just words. I stared at the message while the candle burned out completely. A laugh escaped my throat, but it sounded empty. 2 years ago, she would have called immediately. Now I was lucky if she answered before midnight. I typed slowly. You could have told me earlier. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. I tossed the phone onto the couch and sat there listening to the rain. The food stayed untouched between us like another argument we never finished. Claire used to love quiet nights. Back when we first met, she'd sit beside me on the fire escape outside my old apartment while eating takeout fries from the same box. She used to hold my arm with both hands like she was scared life would pull me away from her. Now she barely touched me anymore. Everything changed after her promotion 6 months ago. New clothes, new friends, new restaurants I couldn't afford. Every conversation became about successful people and bigger opportunities. You need to think bigger, Daniel. Connections matter. Nobody stays poor forever unless they choose to. At first, I thought she was just motivated. Then the cancellations started. The distance. The way she checked her phone while I talked. The way her smile became smaller every week. I kept telling myself things would go back to normal once work slowed down. Love makes excuses before it accepts the truth. The next evening, Mason slammed a coffee onto the table inside the construction site trailer. You look dead. Thanks. I'm serious. Did you even sleep? Couple hours. He studied me for a second before shaking his head. This about Claire again? I focused on the paperwork in front of me. She's busy. Busy people still text back. I didn't answer. Mason leaned against the desk. You've been carrying this relationship by yourself for months. That's not true. Daniel, the way he said my name made my stomach tighten. Not angry, just disappointed. I grabbed my helmet before the conversation could keep going. She invited me to her company event tonight. Mason snorted. An invitation or a last-minute pity text. I ignored him and walked outside, but his words followed me all day. By the time evening came, my entire body hurt. I should have gone home. Instead, I cleaned the dust off my boots in the truck mirror and drove across downtown with a wrapped necklace box sitting on the passenger seat. Claire once pointed at that necklace while passing a jewelry store. Too expensive, she whispered back then. I remember that smile. I remembered everything. The hotel ballroom glowed with gold lights when I arrived. Expensive dresses filled the room. Men in dark suits laughed near the bar, while waiters carried champagne through the crowd. I suddenly became very aware of my worn jacket. Claire spotted me near the entrance. For half a second, her face changed. Not happiness, panic. Then the expression disappeared behind a quick smile. Daniel, you came. You invited me, right? Yeah. She glanced behind her before stepping closer. Her black dress probably cost more than my monthly rent. Beautiful, untouchable, different. You could have told me there was a dress code. You look fine, but her eyes avoided mine when she said it. A tall man approached us carrying 2 champagne glasses. Perfect suit, perfect smile. The kind of man who never worried about rent payments. Claire straightened instantly when he stopped beside her. Daniel, this is Ethan Calloway. The man offered his hand casually. Heard a lot about you. Something about his smile bothered me immediately. Not rude, just confident in a way that made me feel small. Claire laughed softly beside him. Too softly. And Ethan, this is... She paused. Just for a second. But I felt it. This is Daniel. An old chapter of my life. The room didn't go silent. That would have hurt less. Instead, a few people nearby smiled awkwardly. One woman covered her laugh with a wine glass. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly like he understood something I didn't. Old chapter. 6 years together reduced to one sentence. Claire finally looked at me directly. Don't make that face. What face? That one. I swallowed hard. The necklace box suddenly felt heavy in my pocket. Ethan placed a hand lightly against Claire's back while speaking to another investor. The movement looked natural. Practiced. My stomach dropped. You been drinking? Claire whispered. No. You're acting weird. I stared at her. Weird. Like I was the problem here. Music played across the ballroom while people laughed around us. Nobody noticed my humiliation except me. Maybe Claire didn't notice it either. Maybe she stopped seeing my feelings months ago. I should go, Daniel. But Ethan interrupted, leaning toward her with a smile. There's someone important you should meet. And just like that, she turned away from me. No hesitation, no apology. She walked beside him through the crowd, while I stood alone near the entrance holding a gift she no longer deserved. We barely spoke during the ride home. Claire kept checking her phone in the passenger seat while city lights flashed across the windows. Finally, she exhaled sharply. You embarrassed me tonight. I almost laughed. Embarrassed you? You acted insecure around Ethan because you introduced me like I was some random guy you used to know. Her jaw tightened. You're overreacting. Am I? You don't understand the world I'm trying to build. That sentence sat between us heavily. I kept driving. Claire crossed her arms. Love isn't always enough, Daniel. There it was. The truth. Cold. Clean. Rehearsed. I'm tired of struggling all the time. I want more out of life. More money. More stability. You already made your choice. She looked out the window after that. No denial. That hurt worse than anything. When we reached our apartment building, she stayed inside the car while I climbed upstairs alone. The hallway lights flickered softly overhead. My legs suddenly felt heavier with every step. Something was wrong. I opened the apartment door and froze. Half her closet was empty. The framed photo beside the TV was gone too. A small dent remained where it used to sit. My breathing slowed, not from calmness, from shock. Then I saw the papers sitting on the kitchen counter. Luxury condo lease agreement. 2 names signed at the bottom. Claire Whitmore, Ethan Calloway. The ring box slipped from my hand onto the floor. And downstairs, I heard Claire's car drive away. The apartment sounded wrong without her. No music from the bathroom. No skincare bottles scattered across the sink. No half-finished coffee sitting beside the couch. Just silence and the low hum of the refrigerator. I slept on the couch for 3 nights because I couldn't force myself into the bedroom. Her perfume still clung to the pillows. That was the worst part. Not the betrayal. Not Ethan. The smell of someone who already moved on. My phone lit up again around midnight. Claire. I stared at the screen while it vibrated across the table. Then it stopped. A message appeared. You should have answered tonight. Another one came seconds later. Can we talk like adults? I almost laughed. Adults. Like secretly signing a condo lease behind my back was mature. Like humiliating me in front of strangers was normal. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I locked the phone and tossed it aside. The unread message notification stayed glowing in the dark room like a tiny wound refusing to close. Work became dangerous after that. Not physically, mentally. I kept zoning out during measurements. Forgot tools in random places. Nearly backed a forklift into a steel beam because my head wasn't in the moment. Mason grabbed my arm before the supervisor noticed. The hell's wrong with you? Nothing. Right. And I'm secretly a millionaire. I pulled away and kept walking. But he followed me into the break area anyway. You look like you haven't eaten in days. I'm fine. You keep saying that while looking one bad day away from jumping into traffic. I sat heavily in the chair beside the vending machine. The coffee tasted burnt. Everything tasted burnt lately. Mason leaned against the wall quietly this time. She moved in with him? I nodded once. And you're still checking your phone every 10 minutes hoping she changes her mind. That one hit too close. You don't understand. No, I do. He folded his arms. That's why I'm annoyed. My head lifted slowly. You gave that woman everything. She stayed with me for 6 years. Because you made her life easier. The words irritated me immediately. That's not fair. Mason shrugged. You paid bills she couldn't afford. Worked overtime when she lost jobs. Talked her through panic attacks at 3 in the morning. She did things for me too. Like what? The answer should have come quickly. Instead, I sat there staring at my coffee. Mason noticed, and that silence answered the question for both of us. A week later, my mother invited me over for dinner. The second she opened the door, her expression softened. You lost weight. Good to see you too. She touched my cheek gently before pulling me inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic bread. Familiar. Safe. It almost made me emotional. Mom kept watching me during dinner like she was trying to measure how damaged I really was. Finally, she placed her fork down carefully. Claire called me. My appetite disappeared immediately. What did she want? She sounded upset. I laughed under my breath. That's new. She said things became complicated. Complicated. I leaned back in the chair. That's what we're calling cheating now. Mom went slightly. Daniel, what? She loved you. If she loved me, she wouldn't have replaced me before leaving. She might have made a mistake. The room became very still after that. My mother reached across the table slowly. You two build a life together. People throw good things away when they're confused. Pride ruins relationships. I stared at my plate quietly. Then came the part that hurt most. Maybe you should talk to her before it's too late. Too late. Like I was the one losing something valuable. I pushed my chair back gently. I need air. Mom called my name softly as I walked outside, but I kept moving until the cold night wind hit my face. Everybody wanted me to fight for her. Nobody asked why she didn't fight for me. Days turned into routines I barely remembered. Wake up. Work. Ignore Claire's messages. Sleep badly. Repeat. But anger slowly replaced sadness. Not explosive anger. Quiet anger. The kind that grows when memories start changing shape. I began noticing things I ignored before. Claire only touched me affectionately after stressful workdays. Only praised me when I solved problems for her. Only acted soft when she needed reassurance. Meanwhile, I spent years shrinking pieces of myself to keep her happy. Skipped hanging out with friends because she wanted me home. Worked overtime constantly because she liked expensive things. Pretended not to notice when she talked down to me around successful people. The more I remembered, the less innocent our relationship looked. Maybe the breakup didn't start that night. Maybe it started the moment I accepted less than I deserved. 2 weeks later, I stopped by a small cafe near Claire's old office to grab coffee before work. That's when I heard my name, Daniel. I turned and recognized Natalie Brooks from Claire's company. Blonde hair tied into a loose ponytail. Nervous smile. Oh, she hesitated. I didn't know you still came around here. Just coffee. Right. The awkwardness between us felt immediate. Like she knew something. I noticed it instantly. You okay? Natalie gripped her cup tighter. Honestly? Not really. My stomach tightened slowly. What happened? She glanced around before lowering her voice. Claire's been a mess lately. I almost walked away right there. Instead, I stayed frozen beside the counter. Natalie sighed. She keeps checking your social media. Keeps asking if anybody's talked to you. That's not my problem anymore. I know. Her eyes dropped briefly. I feel guilty. The word hit strangely. Why guilty? She looked uncomfortable now, like someone standing near a bomb. Daniel, Ethan and Claire were already seeing each other before the breakup. The cafe noise faded into the background. How long? A few months, I think. My jaw tightened hard enough to hurt. Natalie rushed her next words out quietly. At first, it looked professional. Then Ethan started bringing her to private events. Fancy restaurants. Investor parties. I swallowed slowly. And Claire liked that world. Natalie nodded once. He promised to help launch her business idea. Said he had connections everywhere. I laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because suddenly everything made sense. The canceled dinners, the coldness, the way she looked embarrassed standing beside me at that party. I was already being replaced long before she admitted it. Natalie looked miserable standing there. There's something else. I didn't want to hear more, but I couldn't stop myself. What? Her voice dropped even lower. One night after drinks, Claire joked with some co-workers about you. A strange heaviness settled inside my chest. What did she say? Natalie hesitated. Then finally, she said you'd never leave her because she swallowed hard. Because he'll always stay no matter what. The world went quiet. Not dramatic, not explosive, just empty, like someone reached inside me and removed something permanently. I nodded slowly. That sounds like her. Daniel, it's okay. But my hands were shaking around the coffee cup. Not from heartbreak anymore. From humiliation. I spent years loving someone who became comfortable disrespecting me. That realization hurt more than the cheating. That evening, I opened the drawer beside my bed. The ring box still sat inside. I picked it up carefully, turned it over once in my hand, then stood. The jewelry store smelled exactly the same. Bright lights, fake smiles, tiny glass displays filled with promises. The woman behind the counter recognized me immediately. Oh, you're back. I placed the box down gently. I'd like to return it. Her expression softened instantly. I'm sorry. I nodded once because speaking suddenly felt difficult. 10 minutes later, the money returned to my account. The ring disappeared behind the counter. And somehow, that hurt less than keeping it. Back at the apartment, I packed quietly. Not everything, just what belonged to me. Clothes, books, tools. The old hoodie Claire always stole from me during winter stayed hanging beside the closet door. I left it there. My apartment keys landed on the kitchen counter beside hers. Then I pulled my phone out. Claire's contacts stared back at me. One tap opened years of messages. Pictures, voice notes, plans for a future that never existed. My thumb hovered briefly, then pressed delete. Are you sure? Yes. The screen went blank. No fireworks. No dramatic relief. Just a quiet ending. 3 days later, I enrolled in a construction management certification program. Night classes, better opportunities, a future that belonged to me instead of us. That same evening, my phone buzzed again. Claire, 3 missed calls. For unread messages. Why are you ignoring me? Daniel, please. Can we talk? The last message arrived minutes later. This doesn't feel like you. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I locked the phone and walked into class without answering. The apartment key felt heavier than it should have. I stood inside the doorway for almost a full minute before turning the lights on. Small kitchen, gray walls, clean wooden floors, no memories attached to anything. That was my favorite part. Nobody had cried here. Nobody had walked away from me here. Nobody had turned love into humiliation inside these walls. I dropped my bag near the couch and exhaled slowly. Not bad haze. Mason walked in behind me, carrying a box filled with plates and instant noodles. You sound shocked. I'm shocked. Last year you were sleeping beside empty pizza boxes like a divorced raccoon. A tired laugh escaped me. Thanks for helping me move. Please. He tossed the box onto the counter. I came for free food and emotional healing. There's no food. Then this friendship has become very one-sided. I shook my head while taking the new keys off the table. The metal glinted softly under the kitchen light. Mine, not ours. Mine. Healing turned out uglier than motivational quotes made it sound. Some mornings felt normal. Others started with memories I didn't ask for. A random perfume in an elevator. A restaurant Claire once loved. A song playing in a grocery store while I reached for cereal. Pain didn't disappear cleanly. It faded in pieces. But my life kept moving anyway. I finished my certification program 3 months later. Then came the promotion. Project management assistant. Better pay. Better hours. A future that finally looked bigger than survival. The old version of me would have called Claire immediately with the news. That realization hit me harder than expected. Not because I missed her, because I finally noticed how much of my happiness used to depend on her approval. The gym became part of my routine too. Not for revenge. Not to make Claire jealous. I just got tired of feeling weak all the time. One evening after training, I caught my reflection in the locker room mirror. Broader shoulders, sharper jawline, less exhaustion in my face. The scar across my right hand still stood out under the bright lights. A thick pale line from an accident years ago at work. Claire used to trace that scar absent-mindedly while watching movies beside me. You work too hard. Back then, her voice sounded worried. Near the end, it sounded embarrassed. Funny how the same sentence can change meaning depending on love. Around that same time, Claire started appearing online again. Not directly, just fragments. Photos from charity dinners. Vacation pictures beside Ethan. Expensive wine glasses. Luxury hotel balconies. Perfect smiles. But something about those pictures felt staged now. Like actors trying too hard to convince the audience the movie wasn't falling apart. One night, Mason leaned over while I scrolled absent-mindedly. She looks miserable. She looks rich. Same thing sometimes. I locked the phone. I don't care anymore. Mostly true, he corrected. I smirked slightly. That was the thing about Mason. He never let me lie dramatically. A month later, my company announced a charity networking event downtown. Big investors, construction executives, business owners. I almost skipped it. Then my supervisor stopped beside my desk. You should attend. I build project schedules. Nobody wants me at networking events. You've been leading half this department already. He adjusted his tie casually. Time to act like it. The word stayed with me longer than expected. Time to act like it. Maybe confidence really was just repetition, pretending long enough until your brain finally believed it. The hotel ballroom looked strangely familiar the night of the event. Different building, same atmosphere. Music drifting through expensive conversations. Waiters carrying champagne. People smiling with polished teeth and careful confidence. A year ago, places like this made me feel invisible. Tonight, I walked in wearing a fitted dark suit I bought with my own money. No debt, no shame, just quiet confidence earned the hard way. Daniel, my supervisor, waved me toward a group near the center of the room. The next hour passed quickly. Handshakes, introductions, project discussions, actual respect. Nobody looked through me anymore. Nobody treated me like background noise. Then the room shifted, not loudly, just enough for my instincts to notice. I turned slightly and saw Claire. My heartbeat stumbled once before settling again. She stood near the entrance beside Ethan in a silver dress that probably cost more than my first car. Beautiful as ever, but different, tighter around the eyes, less warmth in her smile. Ethan spoke to another investor without even glancing toward her. Claire noticed me seconds later and froze. The reaction was small. Most people wouldn't catch it, but I knew her. Her fingers tightened around her champagne glass. Her expression flickered between shock and confusion, like she expected to find the old version of me still broken somewhere. Instead, I kept talking calmly with the executives beside me. No anger, no desperation, no pain visible on my face. That unsettled her immediately. I could see it. About 20 minutes later, I stepped away from the crowd toward the balcony area for air. Cold wind brushed against my face. Then heels clicked softly behind me. You look different. Claire's voice carried carefully through the quiet night air. I turned slowly. So do you? Her eyes moved across my suit briefly before returning to my face. You cut your hair. You noticed. A small smile appeared on her lips, then faded quickly when I didn't mirror it. The city lights reflected softly in her eyes. I heard about your promotion. News travels fast. Natalie mentioned it. I nodded once. The conversation almost felt normal. That scared me more than anger would have. Claire leaned lightly against the balcony railing. You seem good. The pause before the last word mattered, like she hated admitting it. I'm doing all right. Another silence stretched between us. Not awkward. Careful. You stopped answering my messages. I know. I kept wondering if you changed your number. No. That answer landed harder than I expected. Claire lowered her gaze briefly. So you ignored them on purpose. You left me on purpose. The words came out calm, not cruel. That somehow hurt her more. I watched her swallow quietly before speaking again. You make everything sound simple. It became simple after a while. Her fingers tightened around the glass. You really moved on that easily? I almost laughed. Easily. Like she didn't leave me bleeding emotionally on the floor of our old life. But I stayed calm. No, I just stopped waiting for someone who already left. Claire looked away toward the city. That one hit her directly. You used to talk to me differently. I used to beg for your attention too. The honesty of that sentence hung heavily between us. She blinked slowly. Then finally, Daniel, I never wanted to hurt you like that. Maybe not. I slid my hands into my pockets. But you still did. The ballroom doors opened behind us. Ethan stepped outside while checking his phone. His eyes landed on me briefly before returning to Claire. We're leaving. Now you ready? Not come on. Just an expectation. Claire didn't move immediately. Something uncomfortable flickered across Ethan's face when he noticed that hesitation. We have another dinner after this. I know. His jaw tightened slightly before he walked back inside without waiting for her. That tiny moment told me everything. Control disguised as luxury. Claire watched the ballroom doors close again. Then her eyes drifted downward toward my hand resting near my pocket. Toward the scar. The same scar she used to kiss absent-mindedly while half asleep beside me years ago. Her expression changed instantly. Not dramatic sadness. Recognition. Regret. Like she suddenly remembered who stood beside her before the expensive parties and wealthy men. A construction worker with rough hands who loved her completely. You still have it. I glanced down briefly. The scar. She nodded quietly. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Claire gave a weak smile that never fully formed. You used to hate that scar. I stopped caring. No, her voice softened painfully. You stopped hiding it. That one surprised me. Because she was right. The old version of me spent years apologizing for who he was. Tonight, I didn't feel small anymore. Claire noticed it too, and that realization hurt her far more than jealousy ever could. When I walked back inside, she stayed alone on the balcony, staring down at the city lights like she suddenly didn't recognize her own life anymore. The first rumor reached me through Mason. He walked into my office holding coffee and his phone at the same time. That rich boyfriend of Claire's might be going to prison. I barely glanced up from the project files. Morning to you too. I'm serious. He dropped into the chair across from me and shoved the phone forward. News articles filled the screen. Financial fraud investigation. Missing investor funds. Lawsuits. And right there in the center of it all, Ethan Calloway. I leaned back slowly. Well, Mason muttered, that penthouse probably feels less romantic now. The strange thing was, I didn't feel satisfaction immediately. Just disbelief. The man who walked around like he owned every room suddenly looked fragile in blurry news photos. Public statements. Legal accusations. Anonymous insiders leaking stories online. The internet was tearing him apart piece by piece. And anyone connected to him was getting dragged down too, including Claire. Over the next few weeks, her world collapsed publicly. People stopped pretending not to notice. I heard whispers during networking events. She worked with Ethan closely. Didn't she help manage some investor meetings? I heard her project got frozen. The same social circles Claire once chased disappeared almost overnight. No more charity galas. No more rooftop parties. No more polished Instagram smiles. Turns out wealthy people disappear fast when trouble arrives. Meanwhile, Ethan vanished more every day. Missed appearances. Cancel meetings. Rumors about leaving the country before formal charges landed. Coward behavior. Exactly what I expected from a man who bought loyalty instead of earning it. One afternoon, Natalie stopped by my office unexpectedly. She looked exhausted. Claire got fired. My pen paused over the paperwork. She was connected to Ethan's projects. The company wanted distance from a scandal. I stayed quiet. Natalie hesitated before sitting down. She's not handling it well. That's not really my business anymore. I know, but her expression said she came for another reason. She tried contacting me yesterday. Natalie rubbed her forehead tiredly. She sounded different. Different how? Not arrogant anymore. That answer lingered longer than expected. Natalie studied me carefully. She keeps talking about you. I returned to the paperwork. People romanticize the past when their future collapses. That's not what this feels like. I didn't answer. because part of me already knew. Claire never expected consequences. She thought she could leave me behind and still keep me emotionally waiting somewhere in the background. Like an emergency exit, she could return to whenever life became difficult. Now the exit was closed, and she finally noticed my own life kept moving upward. The construction project downtown finished 3 weeks ahead of schedule because of a system I designed that led to meetings, more responsibility, more trust. Then came the offer, partnership track, not immediate ownership, but close enough to change my future permanently. I sat inside the conference room while my supervisor slid the folder across the table. You earned this. The words hit harder than expected, not because of the money, because someone finally saw value in me without needing me to sacrifice myself first. After the meeting ended, my phone vibrated again. Claire. Voicemail notification. Another one. Then another. I didn't listen to them, but the missed calls kept appearing. Late nights. Early mornings. Rainy afternoons. Like guilt never allowed her to rest anymore. Eventually, even Mason noticed. She's spiraling. I shrugged lightly. People survive breakups every day. This stopped being about the breakup months ago. He wasn't wrong. This was regret. Real regret. The kind that arrives slowly after distractions disappear. Rain hammered against my apartment windows the night she finally showed up. I had just finished heating leftovers when a knock came. 3 soft hits against the door. Not confident. Not demanding. Careful. I already knew who it was before opening it. Claire stood in the hallway soaked from a storm. Mascara slightly smudged. Hair damp against her cheeks. And in her hands sat a large envelope bent from the rain. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. The expensive confidence she once carried everywhere had vanished completely. What do you want? Her fingers tightened around the envelope. I didn't know where else to go. I stayed near the doorway without inviting her inside. The hallway light buzzed faintly above us. Claire swallowed hard. Can I come in for 5 minutes? No. That answer clearly hurt, but she nodded anyway. Fair. The rainwater dripped from her sleeves onto the floor between us. Finally, she held the envelope out slowly. I found these while packing. I took it carefully. Inside sat old photographs, movie tickets, birthday notes, tiny pieces of 6 years together. Then I saw it, the jewelry store receipt, the engagement ring, wrinkled badly from rainwater. Claire noticed my expression immediately. I kept it. What? I don't know. That was probably the most honest thing she'd said to me in a year. I stared at the old receipt quietly. Back then, buying that ring felt like building a future. Now it just looked like paper. Claire wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Ethan's leaving. I didn't react. He's trying to move money overseas before the investigation gets worse. Sounds stressful. A weak laugh escaped her throat before fading quickly. You really hate me now. No. The word surprised even me. Claire blinked slowly. Then why does this feel worse than hate? Because indifference cuts deeper. Because anger still carries attachment. But I didn't say that aloud. She already understood. I could see it in her face. Claire glanced down at her wrist. The luxury bracelet Ethan bought her was gone. Only pale skin remained where it used to sit. I sold most of it. The jewelry, the bags, dresses, watches. Her voice cracked slightly. Turns out expensive things stop mattering when your life falls apart. Thunder rumbled outside. Claire rubbed at her wet eyes angrily like she hated crying in front of me. I thought if I became successful enough, important enough, I'd finally feel secure. You already had someone loyal. I know that now. A painful silence settled between us. Not dramatic, just exhausted. Claire stepped slightly closer. You stopped chasing me, and suddenly everything became loud. My grip tightened around the envelope. What's that supposed to mean? You were always there. Her voice trembled softly. Even when I treated you badly. Even when I pushed you away. Rain continued crashing against the windows behind me. Claire stared directly into my eyes now. The moment you disappeared, I realized how empty everything else actually was. Part of me wanted to stay angry. It would have been easier. But standing here, watching her fall apart, didn't feel satisfying anymore. Just sad. She laughed weakly through another shaky breath. You know what hurts most? I stayed quiet. You never screamed at me. Her eyes glistened. You never begged after the breakup. You just stopped loving me out loud. That sentence hit somewhere deep inside me. Because she was wrong. I didn't stop loving her quickly. I just stopped destroying myself to prove it. Claire reached in her coat pocket slowly, then held out a small apartment key. The luxury condo. I moved out yesterday. I stared at the key without touching it. There's nothing left there anymore. Maybe she meant the apartment. Maybe she meant herself. I couldn't tell. Her voice became smaller after that. I miss who I was before all this. You made choices, Claire. I know. No one forced you. I know. Each answer sounded heavier than the last. Then finally, I was awful to you. The honesty in that sentence almost hurt more than the betrayal itself. Claire took another step forward carefully. Daniel, please. Her hand reached toward mine slowly. Not dramatic, not desperate, just human. But the second her fingers almost touched my skin, I stepped back. The movement crushed something inside her immediately. I saw it happen. Not anger. Acceptance. Tears filled her eyes while her hand slowly dropped back to her side. Too late. That was the tragedy of it all. Not that she regretted losing me. That she only understood my value after losing everything else first. Claire nodded weakly, like she finally understood the distance between us wasn't temporary anymore. Then she turned toward the hallway. But before leaving, she stopped once more without facing me. The worst part, her voice barely rose above the rain. You were the only thing in my life that was ever real. The elevator doors closed a few seconds later, and for the first time since our breakup, she was the one walking away broken. The contract sat in front of me beside a cup of untouched coffee. Partnership track. My name printed neatly across the bottom page. A year ago, I would have stared at that opportunity and immediately thought about who I wanted to celebrate it with. Now I just sat quietly, turning the pen between my fingers while sunlight spilled across the conference table. You planning to marry the paperwork? Mason leaned against the doorway, holding a bag of donuts. I'm thinking. You've been thinking for 20 minutes. He walked inside and dropped into the chair beside me. Sign the thing before they realize you're emotionally unstable. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. There he is. Mason pointed dramatically. That's the first real laugh I've heard from you in months. I shook my head. You act like I survived a war. You kinda did. The room grew quieter after that. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Mason glanced toward the contract. You earned this, Daniel. The strange thing was, I finally believed him. Not because somebody loved me. Not because someone stayed. Because I worked for it myself. My signature slid across the paper smoothly. No shaking hands. No fear. Just certainty. Mason grabbed one of the donuts and grinned. Damn, you actually look alive again. This time, I smiled without forcing it. Life didn't magically become perfect after heartbreak. Some scars stayed. Some nights still carried memories I didn't ask for. But pain stopped controlling every decision I made. That was enough. I moved into a better apartment near downtown after signing the partnership agreement. Bigger windows, cleaner streets, a quiet gym across the block. The kind of place I once believed people like me could never afford. Turns out I spent years underestimating myself because someone else did first. Claire disappeared for a while after that rainy night. No calls, no late-night messages, nothing. At first, I kept expecting another voicemail notification to appear. Then weeks passed quietly, and eventually, the silence stopped feeling strange. Natalie mentioned Claire once during lunch. She's working a smaller marketing agency now. I nodded lightly. No investors? No luxury events. Natalie stirred her coffee slowly. Honestly, she keeps mostly to herself these days. That image stayed in my head longer than expected. Claire alone, not because someone abandoned her, because she finally had nowhere left to run from herself. One Saturday afternoon, I found an old storage box while unpacking books in my apartment. Movie stubs, receipts, birthday cards, tiny leftovers from another version of my life. At the bottom sat a printed photograph of Claire and me from years earlier. We looked exhausted in it, standing outside my first apartment with cheap takeout containers in our hands. but we were smiling like nothing else mattered. I stared at the picture quietly. Not angry, not broken, just thoughtful. Funny how memories lose sharpness over time, even painful ones. My phone buzzed against the table. Mason, you alive? Barely. Good. Meet me downstairs. We're getting food before you turn into one of those lonely rich guys who eats almonds for dinner. I'm not rich. You signed paperwork this week. That's basically millionaire behavior. I laughed again, and before leaving, I slipped the photo into my wallet without really thinking about it. 3 weeks later, my company assigned me to oversee a major project in another city. 6 months minimum, possibly longer. A fresh start. The idea didn't scare me anymore. That surprised me most. There was a time when leaving this city would have felt impossible because Claire existed here. Now it just felt like another road opening. The final time I saw her happened by accident. At least I think it was. Rain clouds hung low over the city that morning while I stopped at a small coffee shop near our old apartment building. The same place Claire used to drag me every Sunday because she liked the cinnamon rolls. I almost walked back out after recognizing it. Then I saw her sitting near the window. Alone. Claire looked up slowly from her coffee cup and froze. Not dramatically, just long enough for old memories to pass silently between us. She looked different. No designer clothes. No expensive jewelry. No polished perfection. Just a gray sweater, tied back hair, and tired eyes that finally looked honest. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she gave a small nod toward the empty chair across from her. If you want. I should have left. Instead, I walked over quietly and sat down. The coffee shop noise hummed softly around us. Dishes clinking. Low conversations. Rain tapping lightly against the windows. Claire wrapped both hands around her cup like she needed warmth from it. You look good. You already said that once. A weak smile appeared briefly. Yeah. The silence after that felt strangely peaceful. Not painful, just final. Claire glanced toward the street outside. Natalie told me you're leaving the city. Next week. That's good. I studied her carefully for the first time since sitting down. She looked calmer now. Sad, but calmer. Like life finally stripped away all the noise she used to hide behind. How have you been? Her laugh came softly. That depends which version you want. The honest one. Claire nodded slowly. I've been learning how to live without pretending all the time. I stayed quiet. She traced the edge of the coffee cup absently. I spent so long chasing people who made me feel important. Her eyes lowered briefly. Then the second things became difficult, every single one disappeared. A painful truth sat underneath those words. I didn't interrupt it. Claire glanced at me carefully. You know what scares me most now? What? That I almost forgot who I used to be before all of this. The rain outside became heavier. Cars moved slowly through the wet streets while soft music played somewhere near the counter. Claire exhaled shakily. You were right. About what? That love isn't supposed to make someone smaller. Those words landed quietly between us. No drama. No fighting. Just understanding arriving too late. She reached into her bag slowly and pulled out a folded photograph. The same picture I had in my wallet. Us outside my old apartment holding cheap takeout containers. Claire smiled faintly after noticing my expression. I kept one too. Something twisted softly inside my chest. Not longing. Grief for what could have been. Claire stared at the picture for several seconds before finally speaking again. Did you ever hate me? There it was. The question sitting between us for over a year. I leaned back slightly and studied her face. The old Claire would have defended herself. Blamed timing. Blamed pressure. Blamed confusion. This version just waited quietly for the truth. And honestly, I searched myself for anger. There wasn't much left anymore. Just distance. Growth. Acceptance. No. Her eyes lifted slowly toward mine. I held her gaze calmly. I just finally loved myself more. Claire's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Because she understood. That sentence explained everything. Why I stopped chasing her. Why I walked away. Why I survived losing her. A small sadness passed across her face before settling into something quieter. Acceptance too. The waitress dropped the check onto the table. I reached for it automatically. Claire noticed and gave the faintest smile. You still do that. Old habits. Another silence. Then I stood. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. Because the conversation was over. Claire looked up at me slowly while gripping the photograph gently between her fingers. I really did love you, Daniel. I believed her. That was the tragedy. She loved me. Just not enough to protect me from herself back then. I know. Her eyes glistened slightly. But she didn't beg this time. Didn't reach for me. Didn't ask me to stay. Maybe she finally understood that some endings don't need another fight. I left money on the table and walked toward the door. Then stepped outside into the cool rain. The air smelled clean. Fresh somehow. By evening, my car was packed for the drive out of the city. Bags in the back seat. Coffee in the cup holder. A new contract waiting in another state. As the highway stretched endlessly ahead, my phone lit softly beside me at a red light. That old photograph still sat inside my gallery. Claire smiling beside me from another lifetime. My thumb rested on the screen briefly, then pressed delete. No anger, no bitterness, just acceptance. The light turned green, and this time, I never looked back once.